Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here tonight. Welcome to all our guests that are joining us for this wonderful lecture that we're hosting. My name is Adam Bell. I'm the academic advisor and faculty member here at the MFA Photography, Video, and Related Media Department at the School of Visual Arts. Most of you guys know me. Those of you who don't know me, welcome. Thank you again for joining us. Charles Traub, our chairperson, sadly cannot be here tonight, so I'm filling in Charles's very big shoes, and he sends his regrets, but he's with us in spirit, or maybe he's in the air, he's landed in Florida at this point. But it's a great honor for me to introduce our two speakers tonight, Thomas Holton and Elizabeth Krist. I'm going to give them a brief introduction, and then the two of them are going to talk about Tom's work. I've known Tom, I guess, since I was a student here, which feels like a very long time ago. Tom was, I think, a year behind me, 2005. And what's kind of amazing is he began the very project that you guys are going to see tonight when he was a student here. And I think that's a really kind of an amazing, incredible accomplishment that they're going to talk about tonight. And I think it really speaks to a kind of deep engagement with the subjects of his photograph, the Lam family, who he's become part of in many respects. But it also speaks to a kind of deeper photographic and ethical engagement with one's subject matter that extends beyond a single photograph. And that engagement becomes inseparable from the importance and significance of the work, which is really kind of remarkable. Oh, I did, yes. So without further ado, I'll give my little brief introduction to both of them. Thomas Holton is a photographer and educator based in New York City. He received a BA in cultural anthropology from Kenyon College and his MFA in photography from this very department. His ongoing project, the Lams of Ludlow Street, has documented the life of a single Chinese-American family living in Manhattan's Chinatown over the last 20-plus years. The project was published as a book in 2016 by Kehrer Verlag and has been shown in the United States and abroad at venues, including the Museum of the City of New York, the New York Public Library, and at the China-Lishui International Photography Festival. The project is currently being featured in exhibition at the Natural Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. through January 2024, right? So if you happen to be down in D.C., go see the show and go see Tom's work. Really wonderful. Tom has taught at the ICP, and he's the co-founder of the VisuaLife photography program, which works with at-risk teenagers in collaboration with the Children's Aid Society in New York City, and he is currently a photography instructor at the Trinity School here in New York City. Joining Tom tonight is Elizabeth Krist. She is a member of the Visual Thinking Collective and was a National Geographic photo editor for over 20 years. She's on the board of Women Photograph and of the W. Eugene Smith Fund. She's curated 3 recent Photoville installations and the Women of Vision exhibition and book, and she teaches at ICP and La Luce, and she recently has been working with Catchlight, Apple, and the Eddie Adams Workshop and National Geographic. She is also the recipient of numerous awards. There's a long list here, so I won't go through them all, but many. It's a great thrill to have both of them here in discussion about Thomas's work. So please join me in welcoming the two of them.
So I'm sure that many of the students here would be stunned to think that a project they're working on now in school might last over 20 years, turn into a book and multiple exhibitions, and end up becoming your signature body of work. So you never know, Tom, right? So I'm curious about what you said to the Lams when you first approached them. to start photographing? Because your grandparents were living in Chinatown, right? I mean, did you even speak Chinese? Did you think you would be photographing them for like a semester?
So thank you very much. This is I'll keep this picture up there for a little while. Pardon me while I manage a microphone. Yes, I am a photographer. I cannot believe that a project I started in this building quite, I wouldn't say randomly, but wholeheartedly, earnestly, because you're just desperate to make work, turned into this lifelong project that's still going on. So that's a testament to your professors. Remember that. That's a testament to your collective thought and your community that you have here. Okay, so that's really important. A little bit about myself. Okay, so yes, my grandparents did live in Chinatown. I am half Chinese. A little bit about my background is that I think it's important for everyone to hear this because it's context. All right, everyone makes work for a reason. You make your work for a reason, you make your work for a reason, and usually it's something deeply personal somewhere inside of you that drives you to make something. So my mother is Chinese. She fled China during the Communist Revolution but grew up in Taiwan. My father was a travel photographer, did some National Geographic, and he was in Taiwan and met my mother. They got married there, and then she moved here to New York City and moved very much into his Caucasian, white American life. She didn't move with any parents. Her brothers and sisters stayed in Taiwan. So essentially, she kind of came here completely a fish out of water. I was born not in New York City, but I've lived here my entire life. But I grew up in a very, again, Caucasian kind of, my father's New York City life was well established when I was born. So I grew up in schools here in the city. Eventually, my grandparents did move from Taiwan, and eventually my mom's aunts and uncles all moved here, New Jersey, New York area. My grandparents lived on Grand Street, right there, right around the corner from the Lams. But I could not speak to them. So I could not speak to my grandparents. There was a little bit of a divide, but we went to Chinatown all the time because guess what? You're visiting your family. That's what you do, right? You visit your family. So I was in Chinatown all the time. And so, but I could not speak to my grandparents. I would talk to my cousins. My cousins would have to tell me what they're saying, or my mother would have to tell me what they're saying, then I would talk back, and then my cousins would translate. So over time, even though it was family, and even though I felt like completely normal in the neighborhood, I was there almost every weekend, there was still a little bit of a disconnect. I mean, I could not talk to my grandparents. And so when I became more and more interested in photography, more and more serious about photography, I loaded my camera with film at the time here in this building and would just take the subway and go to Chinatown and just shoot. It was a little bit of an attempt to better understand the neighborhood, to see what life was like, right? But what ended up happening is I shot mostly on the street, black and white. I photographed a lot of things that we could all photograph. Not to say that it couldn't be an incredible photograph, but it was the guy selling the fish on the market, right? It was the woman selling the vegetables. So I was, frustrated a little bit. It was great. It was fun. It was energetic, but it felt very
superficial.
Felt very superficial. Thank you. It felt very surface-based and superficial. And guess what? Charlie Traub, who's not here, was like, "You got to get behind closed doors," right? So listen to that man. All right, I'm not just saying it because we're back in this building, but get behind closed doors. And then you walk around neighborhood, and if you look up, you see thousands of apartments, right? We've all do this, right? You see thousands of apartments, and you start thinking about it, and behind all those apartments are people with stories and people with lives, and everyone's story is worth something to tell. And so I started working with a local housing advocate. So I was like, how the hell do I get behind closed doors? So I crit once a week, right? You had to show work once a week. And so I Googled Chinatown housing advocate, just throwing spaghetti on the wall, just trying to do anything. And a Chinatown housing advocate would be an individual or an organization that that represents tenants in the neighborhood, correct? And so we got some tenants who are probably a little wary about authority, maybe don't even speak English, are not aware of their rights as tenants. So the Chinatown housing advocate would make sure that their complaints were fulfilled and met, and any issues they had with, hot water or whatnot was dealt with. So I Googled 5 of them. 4 of them said, no way, you can't come with us. This is a client lawyer privilege. We can't just bring you to someone's house and you can take pictures. But thankfully, one person was like, sure, no problem. I go on Tuesdays, I don't remember the day, but I go on Tuesdays from 2 to 6, and I go to all the neighborhoods, I go to all the apartments, and we visit the families, and I double check that their heat has been turned on, their hot water is fixed or whatnot. And she's like, why don't you come with me? And I was like, oh my God, okay. So one of those families was the Lams. And I stayed there, and I made some photographs. I photographed maybe 10 different families here at SVA. And what ended up happening is, even though it was broad, like 10 different families, I was finally behind closed doors, this is what I want to see, I was still only there for like a half hour, right? So the woman, the housing advocate, her name is Rosie. Rosie would explain who I was. Someone would sit on a couch like this, wait for me to take pictures and be like, and then start looking like this, like, when's this guy going to leave, right? So even though I'm in your house, it's a little stiff. So yes, I loved it. I got behind closed doors. I actually got some pictures I liked, but it kind of, it was still kind of forced a little bit. Regardless, I went back the next week after I met the Lams, and I brought this photograph. Okay, I keep this up here because this is the very first day I met them. I met them this is the day I met the Lams. Did not know how long I'd be doing this, but I brought the print back the next week because you don't want to be, you just don't want to be somebody that makes a photograph, gets their photograph, and then, peace out, disappears, right? I got it, I'm in, you want to see more. So anyway, so I brought the picture back, and Shirley, who's the mother not in this photograph, was like, do you want to stay for dinner? I said, okay, that's amazing, that's great. So I stayed for dinner. And then I was like, can I do this again? And her English was much better now, but her English was okay. She's like, yes. She gave me her cell phone number, and she said, tell me when you want to come back, no problem. And so that was 20 years ago. And here at SVA, I went once or twice a week for 3 years, and now I go every 2 weeks for the last 17 years. I saw the little girl last week. She's now 22 years old. Okay, so this photograph right here is Franklin, Michael, and Cindy showing me their passport pictures. They were going to go to Hong Kong to visit their relatives. They ended up not going. But I always start with this because this is literally the first day I met them. I was shooting black and white at a time. So I did not know how long I would do this for. You have no idea because you're just shooting, right? You're getting images back that work for you. You're getting images back that beginning to get into what you want to see. You don't stop, right? You keep plugging along because you keep making more. You keep making more. And plus, I didn't really know them just yet. All right, so you just kept shooting, and I kept with black and white for a little bit.
So shall we keep going with the images?
So I shot black and white for I shot black and white for a whole year, all right, here at school. This is, got invited to a barbecue. I thought maybe you're going to go to a park, and we went to their roof. And that's Franklin riding his bicycle on the roof. This is Franklin peeking over the roof, checking out the neighbors. I don't know if that's their laundry, but that's where much of laundry was shared. So I started going back regularly. I was put on the list of people that could legally pick their children up in public school, in their school. I think I provided free daycare, to be honest, right? So I was like a free babysitter. And I think people ask me, like, how did you choose the Lams? I said, no. They allowed me into their life, right? I didn't choose them. They were the ones that kind enough to open up their world to me and invite me back. And I also think that I provided entertainment for the kids, because the kids were 6, 5, and 2 at the time. And Shirley would then say, you stay here with the kids. I'm going to go shopping for dinner. And I was like, okay, I have no idea what to do, but I didn't have any children of my own. But I was like, okay. So I think a lot of it was the generosity, but also I think
Yeah.
I like provided free daycare. I was like a free babysitter.
I feel like the next image is really important too, because,
Yes.
and I can see why it's the cover of the book. It just really symbolizes, how you got behind that door. So your own identity gave you an emotional stake and a real incentive to pursue this project. I'm just wondering, how do you advise students when they are looking for their own, ideas to pursue and cover in depth?
I would have to say, and I'm a teacher myself, okay, I would have to say, try to do something that's only you can make. I tell students that all the time. Try to make something only you can make. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's easy for me to sit in this chair and say that, but in a world where we're completely flooded with photography every day, right, you got to do something that hopefully only you could do. You go watch the sunrise over the Grand Canyon, there's 1,000 photographers there, right? So it's easy for me to say that, but I would definitely say, like, if you could find something that only you can make that's unique to you, it's usually something right in front of your nose. You don't have to go to the other side of the planet to do something. If it's your family, if it's your loved ones, if it's a location that means something important to you, you really need to care about what you're photographing, all right? Because what happens, and I'll be rhetorically, what happens if the photographer doesn't care about what they're shooting? What do you think happens? I'm a teacher. Awkward silence. What happens?
I mean, you're going to be bored.
You're
right?
going to get bored. You're going to get bored,
You
right?
don't
You're
wanna
going to. It's
get
going
out
to
of
feel
bed
like
and-
it's going to feel like you're pulling teeth. You don't want to go shoot this. It doesn't mean anything to me. And even though you force yourself to shoot it, if you don't really care about what you're shooting, and if it doesn't personally mean something intrinsically deep to you, the viewer will see that. You're just banging out film or files at this point, right? You could just bang it out. You could tell. So one thing I would always advise is, and again, it's not that easy. It's easy to say this, but try to find something that's unique to you, only you can make. You're your own person. You have your own unique experiences in this life, in this world. Everyone's life is a little different. What has happened in your life, or perhaps somebody that you love that you want to investigate. Find an idea, a place, a group that you think is worth checking out. And then if you stick with it and you love it, you're going to make crappy pictures all the time. I make crappy pictures all the time. All right, I don't show them to you, but I make crappy pictures all the time. But that doesn't stop me from photographing, because I know the emotional rush I get back from a picture I love is worth going through that process. That's part of the process too. You just kind of make some bad pictures.
And also, I'll just add, and I don't know, Erin, if you want to keep going with the images, but also I'll just say that, at National Geographic, if you had access to any particular community or subject that was unusual, or that, we wanted to see that other people couldn't show, that was definitely an advantage in getting your foot in the door. So my other question is a little complicated, my next one, so I'll just read it. But I'll say there have always been questions about the relationship between the artist or journalist documenting a situation and the people in their stories. Like, look at Gordon Parks at Life, for example. Of course, it makes a difference whether you're photographing in the context of a newspaper or for a personal artistic project. It does feel like attitudes and ethical expectations have evolved from an insistence on journalistic distance into an obligation to support and collaborate with people in pictures you're making. I mean, that could be a whole evening in itself, talk about that. But so we've seen other long-term projects by photographers like Darcy Padilla, Nina Berman, Karen Marshall, other photographers, in which they grew close to the people in their pictures. And you're clearly part of the Lam family now. Can you talk about the impact your photographing the Lam family has had on them, and what kinds of responsibilities you felt to them?
Photography has always been a uniquely, I wouldn't say aggressive, but obviously you're asking the planet to provide you with something, right? That's what makes photography uniquely hard, is that the world has to present something to you at that moment when you're standing there with a camera. And so that's the challenge is great, right? But it's also very difficult. In terms of getting to know the Lams, obviously I'm very, very close to them right now. This daughter was the flower girl at my wedding, if you guys remember. My classmate's over there. She was the flower girl at my wedding, and it's amazing. I don't have any brothers or sisters, so I don't have any aunties that would have cousins or nieces or whatever. And the girl from my photography project, which I always do this because I hate calling it that, is coming down the aisle. And you're like, this is incredible. So I do owe them, obviously, a huge amount of gratitude. They let me into their lives. I show them every single photograph, all right? So I show them everything. So they would, most of the time they just say something like, "Oh, I don't look good in that." So, but they aren't like vehemently against any pictures. I try not to be sensational with images. They're very calm. They're very serene a little bit. So I have been witness to, family fights and stuff like that. I won't photograph that. Maybe the aftermath or like a quieter moment, right? And what it's meant to them. Cindy had to work tonight, so I was going to try to drag her here. But she moved back to New York City, which is very good for me. The oldest son wrote his college essay, about a photographer that's been photographing his family's life for the last, I don't know, whatever years it was. All right. I was just part of the essay. It wasn't the whole essay, but it was also, he touched on it because it gave him confidence, meaning like somebody thought we were worthy enough to be documented. All right. So I know that is very true for a young man, and he had a rough high school. So that's really nice to know that, by being photographed and someone cared enough to come back and see our boring lives, that it meant that we were something. And the father loves the fact that this book is out. The father is very happy about this, even though now the parents are divorced. He's very happy about it. It's just because life is ups and downs. So as you can see, I switched to color. One of my frustrations here when I was at school was you would hit creative blocks. Guess what? Who's hit a creative block? Right? We all hit creative blocks. And one of my teachers here was like, switch to color. Just try it. I was like, you know what? I'll try it. And I haven't gone back. Color is information. Color is mood. You can now see the images in with the red flowers. The previous images with the bedroom, right? With the colorful sheets. This is their rooftop where Shirley does her laundry. So they got very, very used to me being there. I switched to color film at the time, and I just kept at it, and I kept going, and I got to know them. That's the big thing. I got to know them. When I first was photographing there, I was maybe doing it with the Housing Advocate. I gave pictures to the Housing Advocate, which is the company here. I gave them to them for free. Here, take them. Use them for your brochures, use them for your catalogs, in return for the access you gave me. That was one of the promises I made. So it became less and less about their small apartment. Their apartment is like 350 square feet. It's really small. There's 5 of them in it. And so it became less and less about that, and I got to know them as people. I got to go there regularly. I got to know them. They got used to me being there, all right? So then you start seeing things. You start caring less and less about the physical stuff, and it's more about your connection to another human being, which is important.
It is amazing, though, when you see the rooftop picture and you realize it's one of the very few that's actually outdoors. Almost everything else in the book is, except for the very, very last one of Cindy with the umbrella, but everything else is in this tiny apartment, and I just feel like you're squeezed up right against the family, which in a way, is kind of great for us because it's that intimacy, that we see all the time. But then on the other hand, I just think for you, it's such a challenge, you can't even back up to like vary the angle or the focal
I am
distance.
always in the corner.
Yeah.
I'm always in the corner under a bunk bed, jamming myself somewhere, all right? God bless wide-angle lenses, all right? So that rooftop picture also, that view is not there. I don't know if you guys go down to Chinatown now. They're surrounded by glass towers, and they're still there. Their building is being renovated around them. So their apartment still looks exactly the same, but the apartments around them have been renovated. Their neighbors are like 25-year-old hipster girls now that we live on the Lower East Side, So, but they're still there.
Yeah, Aaron, maybe you should keep going.
Yep.
Yeah, did you want to say something about this one, Tom?
This was, again, just being there for the quiet, dull moments. It didn't have to be, sensationalized. It taught me to really slow down and pay attention, right? Because sometimes nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. It's just so boring, but then something might happen. So as a photographer, I started beginning to look at the previous picture where Stephen was staring at me, where I'm just eating dinner. I look over and he's staring at me. She's tenderizing pork here while watching a Chinese soap opera. And so these are all made here. These are still the SVA work. But here is where we could do a little bit of a break. I stopped shooting for a couple years. I kept in touch with them. I still saw them regularly. I kept in touch with them. I got married. I tried to do other photography things, but I saw them regularly. And I always knew I wanted to shoot them again because they mean something to you now, right? Something, it's no longer a photo project. I always do that, right? Because I hate saying that. It's just something I do now. It's like life, all right? But in 2008 or 9, the recession, we had a recession here, and a lot of people lost their jobs. And the father, Stephen, lost his job. And so she took a job as a home health aide, which is a very common thing, to get certified to take care of older people at their home. So this is no longer Ludlow Street, this is Henry Street. And so she's like, I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm taking care, I got certified, I'm taking care of an old lady. And so this was at her new job. And then I knew the story had changed. All right, so you want to push the narrative forward. I'm always talking about finding a photograph, you know what's going on in their lives at the time, push the narrative forward. All right, so this was pushing the narrative forward because she no longer, she didn't work before, now she's working. All the kids are in school now, so she was free during the day. But so I started hanging out with her at work.
Do you want to go to the next one there?
Yeah.
Thanks. Because when you first started, there was no social media as we know it. And I'm just curious, when did you start sharing images of the family, and how did they feel about it? And are you really active, like on Instagram or anything?
I'm pretty late to the game.
Okay.
I started maybe about 2 years ago, and I started showing work that's not in the book, but I started way back. I could start, 2 years ago, I could show pictures from 2021. I went back to 2003, so I wanted to tell the story from the beginning. I show work now that's not in the book. I show some outtakes.
And how do they feel
go
about
back
it?
to the last one. Go back to that one. They're fine with it. You know, again, I show them everything, so there's no theoretical surprises. All right. So I'm sorry. I wanted to go back to this picture because at the same time, Stephen lost his job. The family was breaking up. They are now divorced. So there was this weird period of a year or two where you could kind of see things that are kind of much heavier. Right? The tone was much heavier. The parents were fighting. The father would not come home for dinner sometimes, come home late. I wouldn't see the father. And then the kids got bigger. And so what ended up happening is I like this photograph because what happened is the 3 beds that were put together, a unified family, is now kind of a system of bunk beds and curtains. I'm jammed in a bunk bed right now. So I saw this as emotional barriers were going up. The kids were becoming teenagers, but it has its own host of nonsense. And then they're also putting up curtains and stuff like that. So I started shooting again in earnest, going once a week all the time to see what's going on.
So were there ever times when there were conflicts that you were afraid could end the connection, or like some point where you felt it would be better to break off the coverage? And I'm just wondering, if there were factors that threatened the relationship, how did you handle that?
No, I think there was never a time where they were like, we don't want you doing this. I was always terrified of it, to be honest, right? It was in the New York Times. They did a big spread in the New York Times in like 2007. And I was like, oh man, I hope they think this is okay because, you're photography students here. The New York Times calls you up and wants to put up your work. You're like, yes. So like, maybe it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? They say, right? So that made me a little nervous, but they're okay. And also, then if you respectfully photograph them in a way that you're not showing ugliness or if you're not showing anything that's, again,
like them fighting or
exactly. It wasn't a documentary like that. It wasn't a pure quote unquote documentary. So there's never been anything, but I'm always nervous about it,
Yeah. It did make me wonder, actually, all these really close up, pretty still pictures, whether you miss, that kind of action of being outside or people running or anything. But anyway, we don't have to.
Yeah, no, I chose to remain indoors. I chose to do things slowly and calmly. This is him on the computer.
No, it gives it a real coherence, I think, in the book. But
it gives it, there's a little tension, I guess, because it's so small and so tight.
Yeah.
This is at their friend's house. This kid's always on a computer. You're going to see him on the computer all the time.
So did you have editors who gave you feedback as you progressed? I mean, if you did, what did they do that you felt was most valuable?
Once I left here, I was kind of on my own. That's the one thing I tell you guys to value this. I have friends who I would show work every once in a while, but never anything too intense. I came in a couple times maybe to show Charles some work,
Right. I was
But that
wondering
was a
about
while ago. Like
t-shirts.
I would come in and said, maybe with a stack of pictures, and I think we've all probably done it. Just be like, Charlie, can I have 5 minutes of your time? But other than that, I kind of just kept it going. So you can see Cindy here. Again, she's fabulous to photograph. The camera loves her. She likes the camera. You can see the bunk bed situation coming along. But this is really just me hanging out. Hey, guess what? Dinner's ready. So I eat dinner. And then all of a sudden she just stopped, and I was like, hold that. And she'll hold it for me.
It's funny because I was noticing that, everyone is getting older in the pictures, and I feel like, we as the audience are getting older. But then you have all these little still life things that punctuate, and the food just looks just the same and just as good every time.
During this time when they were divorcing, again, I picked up the camera, stories, new part of the story, right? Something, again, push it forward. I always would I'd work all day, and I'd go down to Chinatown, and I'll text the daughter, who was very good about responding because everyone else sucked. And I was like, where are you? And because they always went to where the mother was. The mother worked in a couple places, feeding her old patients. So this is the patient's home. So, this was a different apartment in Chinatown, so I'll just run to that apartment. Or I would meet the girl at her house. Most of the time I'd meet Cindy at Ludlow Street, and then I'll take her to wherever we're eating. So this is the patient's son's house. You go next one. So I made a concerted effort. I did not see Stephen as much, all right, but guess what? I still wanted to keep in touch with him. He was in the process of breaking up with his wife and eventually moving out, so I tried to make a concerted effort to be like, hey, I haven't seen you in 2 months. Can I come to Ludlow? And he said, okay, Tuesday after work is fine, or whatever day it was. And here you can see how comfortable he was because he was taking a nap and he proceeded to fall asleep, and I let myself out. They are very used to me being there to the point where they fall asleep when I'm there. I've let myself out of that house so many times. It's like, all right, good night, everyone. I guess so. This is him about to take a nap, but also one of the last few times I saw him in Ludlow. That's the old patient's house. That's the granny that they took care of in the background. And the man in the previous photograph she's 105 years old. That was her 85-year-old son. It was crazy. And so she'd passed away, and then Shirley took care of the son, and he just passed away. But that's Cindy at the house. She has huge feet. I always have to bring that up. This is Shirley prepping dinner for the patient. So this is no longer Ludlow Street, still in Chinatown. What's going on in their lives? She's at this house all the time, taking care of the old lady.
So I was wondering, how did you know when it was time to publish the book?
Sometimes the book publishers tell you.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning, I graduated here falling in love with photo books because that's all we did, right? You look at photo books all the time. And you love photo books because you have the exhibition, which is fantastic, but it comes down after 2 months. Photo books, you pull off the shelf 2 months, 3 years, 10 years later, look at it again. So, we tried to parlay this work into a photo book after SVA, and it just didn't happen. It was too early. It's very expensive to do. There's a lot of rejection involved. But thankfully, I was told no by a couple publishers, and I said, you know what? I'll just keep shooting. And it actually helped a lot because guess what? You take more pictures. But I always knew I wanted to do a book because I just love the physical form of the book, and I think all of us would agree probably that photo books are one of these things you always want because, again, you could pull it off the shelf 10 years later, show it to somebody, or a book. I remember, that book by Shen Wei. I'll pull it off the shelf and take a look at it and get some ideas.
But I definitely feel like, so much of what resonates with people is, watching those kids grow up over 20 years. So how many years after you started photographing did the book actually come out?
13.
Yeah, so that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
And so is there a second Lams book in your future?
I would certainly hope so. I've certainly been making work. I'm not in the rush to publish anything just now because I kind of believe in the shooting and kind of keeping up the narrative and stuff.
I mean, do you have to wait another 13 years?
I don't know.
'Cause
Probably.
how would it be different from the first book?
Well, you just do the new stuff, maybe.
Yeah.
And also, like, guess what? Children get married. Children have children, and you see what that happens.
That's what I was wondering, if you'd be photographing the kids.
Oh, I always say,
Michael
as long as they
Franklin
open their
and
door,
Yeah.
I'll photograph. As long as they open the
Wow.
door for me, and I guess there's that fear that you're saying.
Uh-huh.
This image is just before the father moved out, so again, I find a picture, if I can connect it to what I think I do believe is happening in their lives right then and there, and the picture works. So there's something about his wistful look off, and he moved out right after that. And then
Yeah, let's try to go through some more of the
Yeah.
images.
he moved to New Jersey. I picked up the kids, drove them to New Jersey. This is a pretty, one of my favorite photographs, because Cindy was blown away that he had a whole walk-in closet. They don't have a single closet in Ludlow Street, so there's a whole room for his clothes. And so she was in there going, "What the hell? Do you have a whole room for your clothes?" And I tell people, this is one of the few times where I saw Michael in the reflection, and she was about to come out, and it's no big deal. I said, "Stop, hold that there for a second." And the camera's always very, very much nearby, and she's also very good at being like, okay, she won't get mad. She'll stop. Spring break. All right, so as the movie story goes on, he had a rough high school experience, and this is about, I think it's 5 days before he goes to college, and there's something kind of genuinely relaxed about him, and this is at their grandma's house. I drove him to college. They don't have a car. I guess it's my car, so our car, I suppose, but my wife drives all the time, but I barely drive it. So I took the car and drove him to college. And there's something about the blank walls, and he had a rough high school experience, kind of like the blank slate, like starting over a little bit. So I drove him to college. And so for a solid 4 years while he was in college, they're exactly 4 years apart. So she started high school when he started his first year. For 4 years, it was just me and her. Like, I just hung out with her all the time. Again, she responded to my number of my text messages. Everyone else was no good. But I found her all the time, and I just photographed with her. And this is, as a photographer, I always tell, what did Charlie always, there's always some kind of weird thing about the photograph, right? There's something great about it. It was a great photograph, but there's one thing that is like, gets it, and for me, it's the, she's pushing down one key for some reason. I have no idea why. And the Superman shirt is amazing. She's a great kid. So the name of this photograph is Supergirl. But she's great. So go on. This is one of the few photographs you were mentioning before outside of Ludlow Street. I've continued shooting, obviously, but that's the last picture in the book because I wanted to kind of ease the air out a little bit, maybe remove a little bit of the tension, have some sunlight, and we had taken her to go swimming in a public pool because she didn't know how to swim, so we tried to teach her how to swim. So they're like, "You want to come to Chinatown and teach Cindy how to swim?" I said, "Okay, let's go." So we went and jumped into a pool.
But ending with that picture definitely felt like it was kind of a portal to the next book, like you're just stepping off into the void.
Right, after, 50 pictures kind of intensely inside, I liked ending with this one. That was one of these decisions that we chose to purposely do.
Yeah, that was great.
So the father moved to, this is no longer New Jersey, the father moved to the Bronx. So I grabbed my car and went to visit him in the Bronx. And in a very meta moment, if you can see it, in the upper right corner is this book. So, the book said, so it's just kind of funny. These are those little comical moments I like. So I always wanted to keep in touch with him, of course, right? So I went to visit him in the Bronx. Shirley, who makes some very interesting decisions in life, met a man on WeChat and went to China and married him. And proceeded to spend $10,000 on a photo shoot, where you change your outfits and do all the photographs, right? Your hair and different kind of dresses. They made a CD because he's a singer. He's like a pop singer. And they made a music video, which I keep on my phone just because it's pure comedy. And so she was like, "Here's the poster. Do you want it?" I was like, "Nah, it's okay. I'm trying to quit." But I have the CD. But she met him on WeChat and went to China and married him. And I have no idea. He hasn't come over.
Have you met him at all? Have you met the new husband?
On FaceTime.
Oh.
But he hasn't come here. She's gone there once or twice. But COVID obviously screwed that up right lately. But,
how old is he? He looks like he's about 12.
Yeah, he looks like he's 5 years old here. That's a lot. That's a lot of Photoshop. Okay. That's a lot of Photoshop on both of them.
Right.
The video is comical. They like rented horses and stuff. It's like, what in the world is going on? And she's showing me this poster, and I think the look on Cindy's face says it all. Like that's she's just like, Cindy's just like, yeah, don't even ask, you know.
Stepdad.
And so this is at grandma's house. That's her grandmother in the background. This is their grandma's house on Holton Street, and this is 1 month before Cindy goes to college. And this kind of reminds me of that other picture when she was on her lap when she was like 10 years old. And guess what? I drove her to college. This college was much further away, required an overnight stay. But me and the father and the older brother drove. The older brother is sitting next to me. You can't see him. But I love the fact that her name's on the door. You kind of can see it. And again, it's a blank room. But again, I photographed in the hotel room. I photographed in her dorm room. Okay. And then she just put her hand, her head on the elbow like that. I'm like, okay, hold that. And she'll get up, and I'm like, no, go back. And she's very good at doing it. This is Shirley still taking care of the 105-year-old woman died, and this is her 85-year-old son. So Shirley proceeded to continue to take care of this one family, and this is about a month before he died. You can see his feet. I knew he was sick, so I wanted to go there, and very amazing old man that, was always kind and generous to me. He spoke pretty good English. He was a New York City taxi driver for many years. This is about a month before he died, so that's on Henry Street. This is everyone home from college. Cindy was a freshman. Michael was in graduate school. So when they're all home together, I'm there like in a heartbeat. Like I find out they're all home, thump, I'm down there. So because the parents are in the Bronx, the mom's always working. So this is they're all home from college.
I'm just wondering if you photograph your own family with this kind of dedication.
My son doesn't want anything to do with it. So I've been able to photograph my child pretty good, but now he's 13 and he's like a little punk. So he's just a 13-year-old boy now, and it was just like, no. This is Henry Street. She's listening. His name is Bo. Bo died, and she's listening to his voicemails. She saved his voicemails, so she's listening to his voicemails and kind of smiling. Great man. Franklin. Very hard to photograph, but he's still there. All right, so now we're getting around 2019. She's in college. I am literally squatting underneath the TV set, looking right above my head. And once again, there's something that the hand holding. It kills me. The hand holding kills me. And they're watching movies. We're watching TV. This is also the new face, who's Linda, who was Franklin's girlfriend for a while. They broke up, but Linda was very baffled by my existence. But she's like, "Who's this guy?" Cindy said she does not remember a time not being photographed, because I met her too. You don't remember that. She's like, this guy's here every 2 weeks. He's just always at my house, and he takes me to college, and she comes to my house, and she stays with me every once in a while. So this is great. So COVID hit. I didn't leave Brooklyn for 3 months. Finally, I wanted to make portraits of them. Felt comfortable finally leaving. I rode my bike across the bridge. I didn't want to ride the subway. But I organized the photo shoot with Cindy over Zoom. So let's Zoom with Cindy so if I could take some pictures. So she was kind of a little annoyed with me because I told her to walk around to find me some good light. Oh, that light stinks, that light stinks. Oh, wait, the window's coming over. So she went over there. So she's walking around with a computer like this. And that's Franklin right there. And they have this mirror that they constantly move, which is great. Because when they constantly move it, it's something new. They're constantly redecorating their bedrooms. Bunk beds like this, bunk beds like this, bunk beds like this. So that's through Zoom. They let me into their little pod. Remember, you all had pods when you're in COVID, right? So they let me into their pod. And so I was so thrilled to be back in Ludlow Street. The daughter's school basically went fully remote, which many of us had to do. And so she did it from home. So I rode my bike there, and this is called Quarantine Lunch. This is Shirley just paying her bills. A little bit of a pack rat. She did not feel comfortable with taking public transportation during COVID, so I drove her back to school. So I picked her up, Me and the father drove her to the start of her junior year. This is her apartment. We spend the night over there because it's a long drive. So we were packing her into her new college dorm. All right, so now these are really new. These are not in, none of these are in the book. All right, so this is been fun for me because I'm photographing outside Ludlow Street more, just to kind of mix it up. It feels really good. I still go to Ludlow Street. I've made it thousands of pictures in Ludlow Street, so to mix it up is good sometimes, is to change your visuals, right? Change your eyes. So this is, Stephen is now a florist, and so this is my apartment in Brooklyn, and he brought a flower for my home, for a home housewarming plant. So this is him at my place, and he brought me a plant, and I said, sit right there, the light's nice.
It also seems important that you're transparent about the fact that you're so close to them and that your lives are so intertwined.
I haven't seen Stephen. He just got a new job, so he's working his butt off right now, so I haven't seen him in about a month. Mm-hmm. But there was a long time. This whole year has been me and Stephen all the time because Cindy was still up in school. Yeah, but I was like, hey, come over. I want to see your new place. So come on over.
Yeah. But it's great that you make that clear to the audience who's looking at the pictures, too. So whether it's
this was, remember that Omicron wave between 21 and 22? So I went there for New Year's. I bought a bottle of champagne, which is in between the legs, and we kind of split it there, and I think I bought one of those. I think I bought those ears off the street in Chinatown for like $5, and the father came. The father, I would organize with the father. Hey, I'm going to go to Ludlow Street today. You working? No. You want to meet me there at 12 or 1 o'clock? He said, okay. So we got the champagne, and this is New Year's Eve, the 31st. So we were just kind of celebrating a little bit. Shirley delivering food to her mother. That's the grandmother. I have very few pictures of her. She just laughs at me. I can't speak to her, but whenever I see her, she just giggles. I don't know. I think she just thinks I'm crazy. But she's not known me for 20 years. But it's just like, she's just like, oh, hi, you're here again. Okay, and then she just laughs at me. So I wanted to add her because I don't have many pictures of her at all. In May of 2022, Cindy was graduating college, and so he's a florist now, and I hopped on the train with him. We didn't drive this time. We hopped on the train, and he got on early. I got on in Manhattan, and he got on in the Bronx, and he walked on with this giant, beautiful bouquet, and I was like, I knew I had to take a photograph. And so this is on the train going up to Cindy's graduation. They invited me. She invited me, which is great. She got 5 tickets. I got one of them. Photography is very funny, right? Remember, the world kind of just does funny things to you. Our hotel reservation was lost. And we're like, what? And they're like, oh, we had a computer glitch. Our hotel reservation was lost. So Cindy was like, well, let's go find an airbed. And so we put the airbed on the floor, and I slept on their dorm room floor with their father. The mom's watching TV, but it provided such an amazing photograph for me. And it's just one of those things where you just have to let life happen, right? As a photographer, you let life happen. Oh, okay, so the hotel room got lost. And you're like, okay, what are we going to do? And so we inflated that, and we were watching TV. This is like at midnight. And again, the hand-holding. And Cindy's just great. And I turn on lights. People always ask me, how do you light things? I turn lights on all the time. I use my phone for lights. I'll use laptops for lights. I think I turned it. Is the lava light on? Yeah, I turned the lava lamp on in this one. It's like something. But that's mostly, that's light from the TV. But that was just a wonderful chance that's happening that they lost their hotel reservation. And I love showing that and telling that story because for photographers and photo students, you have to kind of go with it. You just go, okay, you see what happens next. This is her getting ready for graduation. She was getting on her gown, a half hour beforehand. I kind of moved the door around to get her name in it. Please excuse the bondage stuff that she has on the wall. The handcuffs and ropes, which she told me was purely for decoration. I said, you do you, it's cool. So this is her getting ready for her graduation, which is this, again, I was there. They had her boyfriend, her parents, and me. She had 4 tickets, so I was there. This is him working at Trader Joe's.
I mean, that's almost a shock just to see him out on the street,
Yeah.
exterior.
Well, again, it's not nearly as constant as it used to be because I work all day. I have a kid. They're busy. He's moving uptown. So I met him for his lunch break. What time's your lunch break at Trader Joe's? He said, whatever, 2 o'clock. I said, oh, I'll be there. And so we went out to lunch for a half hour, and the light just happened to be nice that day, and it happened to be at that direction at that moment, not this direction. And I was able to get a quick picture of him on his break. This is Cindy and her boyfriend. This is my grandparents' country house where I spent a lot of time, so they came out. So again, let's move the story forward. Let's push it forward a little bit. That's Cindy and her boyfriend, and that's my son's legs. So now we have a little bit more humanity in it, a little bit more personal stuff. So that's the country house my grandparents built, and so Cindy and her boyfriend came out for 3 or 4 days or
So
something
are you
like that.
ever tempted to interview them and incorporate any of that in the next book?
I think about it. I know I've talked to her about it. I've talked to the husband about it, casually.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe that would be something as time has gone by, but maybe that's something that you would transcribe, right, to include in something. Did you guys see Pictures from Home? Anyone see that? Do you know the Broadway show? Adam, you heard about that, right? There's a Broadway show out right now that's based on a photo book, which blows me away. They made a Broadway play about a photo book, and I went to see it because I won a ticket, whatever.
Wait, what is it called?
You know Larry Sultan, the
Yeah,
Pictures from
sure.
Home?
Uh-huh.
It's called Pictures from Home. It's a Broadway play about Larry Sultan making a photo book. And it's starring Nathan Lane, who, I don't know if you guys know, he's a very famous actor. And it just blew me away that they made a Broadway show about a photography book. And the photographs are constantly, they beam them onto the wall of the theater. And anyway, but I bring that up because his book has lots of transcripts and interviews
right.
and stuff like that. So maybe one day. We both take the D train. He goes that way, I go this way. I go back to Brooklyn, he goes uptown, so this is after work. And so I just stood across the platform from him and was lucky enough to kind of shoot a little bit. So again, take it out Ludlow Street a little bit, expand the narrative, push the story other ways. This is Shirley's Mahjong winnings. She cracks me up, so... These are what I like about some of these photographs. This is literally where are you? And she's like, 82 Bayard Street. And, Bayard Street's right in Chinatown. So I go to 82 or Bayard Street, and there's it's like a pharmacy or something. But you go down, and there's a metal door that you bang on, and a little thing opens up. And it's an underground, I wouldn't say, it's literally in the basement, but it's like a mahjong parlor.
Like a secret speakeasy.
Yeah, I don't know if it's illegal. Is it illegal? Yeah. I mean, they're gambling, but it's like $20 here and there. It's not like high-stakes gambling. But she brings me downstairs, and there's 20 people playing mahjong, and I just crack up all the time. When this stuff happens, I laugh all the time because I think life is very funny, right? And my wife's like, "Where are you?" I was like, "I'm in a basement mahjong parlor. Where are you?" So, anyway, so I grabbed her for 3 seconds, just show me your mahjong winnings, and she.
It sounds like
did.
Mrs. Maisel, the amazing Mrs. Maisel.
Yeah, the basement stuff. So yeah, that's in Bayard Street. Okay, we're almost done, guys. This was about 3 weeks ago, where all 3 kids were home, and I had not seen all 3 kids together at once in over a year. And so she brought her boyfriend, and this is back in Ludlow Street. So that's Michael, who now lives in Nevada, of all places. Franklin still lives in Ludlow Street. Cindy just moved back to New York because she graduated and is looking for work. Now she's working now, but and she brought her boyfriend. So I went there, and I was like, this is too amazing to have all you here again, plus the boyfriend. I am crunched in the corner underneath something. I don't even know what I was doing because there's no room. My back hurt, but I love the fact that I saw all 4 of them again for the first time.
So this is the last image, and I just wanted to ask, is there anything you would have done differently? I mean, looking back, or do you have any advice for any of the students who are starting some really long-term project like this?
Well, how do you know you're starting a long-term project? Right? So that's one piece of advice, right? Don't. You might feel that something is done, and that's an honest feeling that you have to consider that you're done. This is the last photo. This was made maybe a couple weeks ago. Franklin's just playing video games. That's all he does. And so this is super dark. I like it because I finally got something super dark. I would just say this, keep shooting. Charlie used to always tell us that, like, Adam was a student here, like, good photos will be seen, right? You keep it up, good photos will be seen. If you are approaching it with an open heart, opening it, being honest with yourself, it's something that you care about. Who knows when it's going to happen, because it happens differently for everybody. You could say, it's like a roller coaster, so you have a show for a while. Guess what? Those shows come down. And then it's quiet for a while. And so I still make work through all that. So right now I have a show in the Smithsonian. That's crazy, okay? This little project that I started 20 years ago in this building to kind of like explore Chinatown is now in the Smithsonian. And but I don't plan that, right? But I think if you find something, listen to your teachers, right? If you find something that kind of works for you and there's something there that you want to dig at and it's kind of digging at you a little bit and you want to care about what you're photographing, and again, it's really easy for me to say that. Just stick with it and just mine it, You're going to hate it some days and you're going to be sick of it, but if it's something that you really care about, you really don't mind doing that. I take bad photographs all the time. And then you get something you like. A zinger. Where's Charlie? Right? That's one's a zinger, he would say. And so guess what? Those 2 months of really crappy photographs I made, I don't care anymore. I got a zinger, because it's something that I love to do. And I always did this with projects. I hate saying that because that's what we always say. What project are you working on? Hey, Shen, what project are you working on? This is now something I do. I grab the camera, I go to Chinatown. I got off the train today, and my son goes, "You going to Chinatown?" I said, "No, I'm actually going back to school." He's like, "Huh?" I'm like, whatever. But I'm like, "No, I'm not taking you home today, buddy. I'm going to get off." He's like, "You going to Chinatown?" He just knows I do that. All right, so this isn't like something I do for, fame or whatever. I'm not famous whatsoever. I make dozens and dozens of dollars. No, it's a joke. It's a bad joke.
But I also think though that it makes a big difference if you want to make life easier for yourself and you want your work to reach a lot of people and you want to share the work that you're making, that you find a project that resonates on a larger scale, that it speaks to larger issues. This is, of course, a really intimate story about the Lam family, but on the other hand, it also talks a lot about issues of, immigration, of people trying to, establish their own identity in a new place, and then the relationships that they have, very intimately within their own family and then with you. So there are just so many levels that it works on, and I think that,
you want to,
that helps a lot, too.
This is the photograph, right? You're looking at the photograph. I always tell this, right? You're looking at the photograph. The image you see in the 4 frame right here, right? The box or the rectangle, whatever. You see that picture, but if your mind goes off of that picture, that's a good thing. That's what you want, right? You want someone to see this photograph. They're looking at a photograph. Here's what I see, but my mind's out here. So you start jumping into what you're talking about.
It's
this
like
is
a
now
springboard or a launching pad.
Right. So you see the photograph, but it's something different for you. It's something different for you. It's something different for you. That's a really strong photograph, hopefully, right? Again, that's not easy. I see this project as no longer, how Chinese people live in New York City. I'm never gonna know that. I have a good idea about it, but it's really, to me, it's family. It's an American family that happens to be Chinese. Life is not scripted. People always ask me, what have you, and maybe you have questions, but what do you learn from this? I'm like, life is not scripted. Life is, nothing is so nicely scripted and neat and everything. It's all ups and downs and, whatever happens, so many things happen for different reasons. And so
just, time passing. I mean, it's really scary to see how fast.
I mean, the narrative of a long base term photography project will take time in it and will include time past, which also makes it stronger, I think. Right? So that's why I'm like, hey, when are you going to make another book? So I don't know. When it's ready, I guess, or when I feel like it's ready.
So, yeah.
But I do believe that it does resonate beyond those pictures because it's about family. It's about your family. Maybe it reminds you of something. For me, it's about understanding that life is different for everybody. Everyone has a story to tell. And again, nothing is so easily scripted. I started it off 20 years ago. I was like, hey, I'm going to understand life in Chinatown. No. How can you do that, right? You're not from there. I still realize I'm an outsider a little bit. I feel very comfortable there, and I know my way around. but it's really just now about like what's happening to this one family, what is going on, right? I'm really kind of keyed on the little girl because she's really great to photograph, and also she's the youngest, and she had a little bit of a hard, I wouldn't say hard, a challenging high school time and stuff like that. So what's next? You never know. So again, as long as they open the door for me, I'll keep going down.
I know. I can't wait to see the book that has their kids in it, too. So we want to open up to questions from everybody in the audience. And
thank you also.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody, for coming. And I also want to say, if you have any questions also about long-term projects, based on National Geographic, just given, what I've worked through the last, 20-some years, I'm happy to answer those too. But really, this is Tom's.
But this is one of the questions I had for you in terms of National Geographic. Check me if I'm wrong. I always see it like the war in Ukraine, some kind of topical event happening right now, right? So were there any long-term projects that you did in National Geographic that after a year, like, okay, come back to me in 2 years with more pictures? Or was it always like, we have to publish this next month?
No, there were so many projects that lasted for years and years because, basically, when I first got to Geographic, and this was, in the 90s, there was a 6-month lead time between the time when we closed the layout and when the magazine actually appeared in your mailbox. So, nothing could be really topical. But, of course, that really changed. And by the time I left, there were digital stories coming out all the time that were just, practically overnight. But I had stories like on ancient Greece that turned into a whole series where the photographer was in the field for 33 weeks, if you can believe that. So, and then there were other things, that required so much research, but then also, access, it's like stories on the North Korean DMZ or Libya or places where you're just desperately trying to get permissions or visas or like the Vatican. And then there were other things, where there were other obstacles or other reasons, but things like, you're waiting, as you have said to me before, for things to unfold, like Chenji Chang was doing a story about North Korean defectors, and so he had to basically wait for them to come over the border into China, and then he would just sort of follow along with them as they went through Laos and went through Thailand, and then finally ended up in South Korea. Or, like Mark Thiong, who would go back to the same sort of empty green field in China, and over the course of like every 8 weeks, he would go back and sort of watch the city grow up from nothing into a metropolis over the course of about 15 months. So then you are kind of waiting for things to take their course. So, but the crazy thing is that the longest story that I worked on was actually for 8 years. There was a photographer named Vince Musi who was assigned just to photograph landscape story that was essentially in his own backyard. He was based in Charleston, and he had to photograph the Ace Basin, which is actually in South Carolina. And he kept getting pulled off the story to work on other more urgent kind of things and to do cover stories, and it was crazy. And when he finally published the story, he actually wrote a little blog post about why it took 8 years to photograph this story in my backyard. It was crazy, and he actually ended up excerpting a lot of the emails that we exchanged without telling me. So that was crazy. But what we would do, because the hardest thing I think for a long-term project like any of those is just to keep your focus, because you're going back and forth in and out of your own personal life. You're trying to give your attention to your family as well as to, all these other short-term assignments you're doing to make income. And then, you have to sort of bring your mind back and pull your mind back to these, these other sort of universes that you're going in and out of. So what we would do at National Geographic, and I think they still maintain a similar structure, is we would try to divide the coverage up into basically 2 parts so that, the photographer, whether it's for 2 weeks or for 2 months or for 2 years, they would have a time when they would come into the office after they were about halfway through, and they would show the work to, the people on the rest of the people on the team, like the design person and the rest of the, like graphics and cartography people, plus the higher editors and management, so that everyone would get a sense of the direction the coverage was going. And then so the photographer and I would edit together, and we would present the work, he or she would present the work. And then, everybody could weigh in on sort of what was missing, what do we have, what do we still need to get. But of course, it's really different when you have a specific, deadline, a specific budget, and you kind of know what you have to get or what you're trying to get. And it's completely different when the project is open-ended, like what you were doing.
Yeah, I'll just also mention, like, it is my quote-unquote project. It is open-ended. I shoot as much as I can. It looks like I shoot all the time. I try to shoot as much as I can. I have a job. I have a child. You also have lives, right? So I understand that I am a picture hoarder. I'll like just shoot, pick the one I like, throw it onto a hard drive, throw it into the cloud, and I gotta wake up at 6 in the morning tomorrow and go to work. And so then I'll like hold on to the pictures for a long time, years, and then a picture I loved that took 2 weeks ago, or whatever, 2 years ago, 2 months ago, gets usurped by something I took last week. So that's why I kind of hold things back until see this picture works better than that picture. Because you don't want to repeat yourself. It's really hard, right? Especially I got 10,000 pictures of this girl staring at her phone, all right? Because that's what teenagers do, okay? So I'm going to use 2. Right? So here she is on her phone again. Oh, crap. I guess I'll shoot it. I hopefully get something good. And then I'll hold on to it. So I don't have any dead points. Especially in these settings
that are so similar, these really tiny, cramped apartments, they're so similar just the way that they're like lying in bed together.
Right. So that's why I was talking about, I know you guys want to ask questions maybe. That's why I talk about, like, I know what's going on in their lives. So if you get a photograph that, like, is about just before he moved out, okay, this photograph is all 4 of them are home. Okay, that works. All right, that's why I'm in touch with, I kind of know what's going on in their lives for the most part. I make a photograph, and if it's like, okay, he just got laid off from Trader Joe's, so I have that picture of Trader Joe's. So that can, again, push the story forward, and you have the benefit of time. I don't have any deadlines. I wish I did, but I don't have any deadlines. So I just shoot. I shoot and hang out with them, and there's plenty of times where I don't take pictures. And remember, if I go once a week for 5 hours, maybe there's 6 days and 19 hours when I'm not there. So other things are happening, right? So, I got other things going on that sometimes just keep me busy. So I'm lucky enough that I have a job, but I collect pictures.
And the other thing that happens is a lot of times, the project actually takes shape in the editing too. I mean, there's a lot that, you're planning and you're anticipating what's going to happen, and certain images you have to have. But then, like at National Geographic, sometimes you might have like 50,000. I think my record was like 69,000, but some of the wildlife people, they were editing 250,000 pictures, for one story, and maybe you have 20 images, maybe you have 8. And so then you're really kind of carving out the shape of the story out of that mass of images. And so I'm sure you're coming up on a huge number count too with your files. And so, you're just constantly trying to keep in mind what's ahead and what you've done already, so you're not just repeating yourself unless you're making it better.
You keep your fingers that hard drives don't die.
Yeah,
right?
well,
I had one
true.
die, and I was like, oh no. But...
So
you guys watch Harry Potter? I has Horcruxes. You know what Horcrux is? Papa, you know what a Horcrux is, right? So I have Horcruxes. Anyone? Am I talking?
I know what you're
so I have 7 hard drives with everything on them, and I keep 2 of them at work. Maybe 5 hard drives. So I call my Horcruxes, right? You put all your raw files on 5 of them. I take 1 to work, because if my apartment burns down with 5 in there, what's the point? So I take 1 back to work. And so if my apartment burns down, I'll at least have 1 Horcrux left.
Right.
I'm
So
still alive.
let's take questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, maybe it's not a question, it's just a comment. But when you were talking about the cover of the book and how when people are willing to look outside of that picture, and then I just had this image of you becoming one, because pretty much the length of the project it took you, which was unanticipated. I mean, you couldn't have anticipated the length of it, and then you became part of the story too. And it's like almost like a vortex, like, you know, when you see water going down the sink, you're just going down and you're becoming part of it. So you're, you know, for you, maybe it was quote unquote, project on the Lams, but you became part of the project. Probably not intentionally. You were just shooting, but you became that.
Thank you. I'm certainly, I mean, there's a picture of my son's feet. That's the closest we've gotten so far. They're in my house. So, which is what you're saying, like, I like moving it, you know, how do you, again, break it up a little bit. So now, you know, Michael's in Nevada. Do I fly out to Nevada? I don't know. But
I know, but if there's some like amazing landscape, I'll be just stunned. You know, I'll be such
right,
a
maybe.
contrast.
But I chose this picture for the cover because behind the door there's stories. And the other day, I'd never even thought about this. The other day, someone mentioned the peephole, how they're kind of looking out at you, and you could maybe look in there a little bit, which I never thought about it. And I was like, that's brilliant. I've been talking about this picture for 20 years, and some kid, it was actually yesterday, some kid was like, I love the peephole aspect to it. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, like, they can see you at the door and stuff like that. So, you know, we chose this as the cover rather than, we were actually going to use this as a cover, but this is much more arresting, I think.
From inside out, and you're looking from outside in.
I never thought about that until some kid said it yesterday. I was like, oh, crap, look at that. Let me write that down. I'm going to steal that.
20 years later.
There's a student of mine. I was like, I'm stealing that. Thank you. I give you $1.
Anybody else?
We have it all figured out.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations on this accomplishment. And I know that you were saying you tried to not feel rushed throughout this project. I'm curious if you ever did, like particularly when you got to the publishing part. If you just got so excited about it that you were like, I need to print this now. I need to distribute this now.
Certainly, when I finally landed a publisher, there was deadlines, and I try to get things as quick, you know. But I'm not gonna. I'm gonna shoot. But if it doesn't work, I'm not gonna force it in a book. The one thing that's actually pretty cool about the Smithsonian show is that it was supposed to happen before COVID, and thank God it didn't get kiboshed because I thought they were gonna kill it, which was like the biggest thing I've been a part of. They're like, no, we're gonna push it back 2 years. And it allowed me to shoot more. And then their first cut was a lot of pictures from here, and I'm, you know, frankly bored of some of these pictures. So I was able to convince them to include some COVID pictures, like the Zoom portrait and stuff like that. So that sometimes, you know, the world presents you with opportunities, or this lets you. It happens. But I never felt rushed. I mean, who knows? It happens differently for everybody. I don't have any book published. I have nothing going on now. I don't have a gallery. I have a job tomorrow I got to be at, you know. But I don't have, I don't have a rep. I just kind of, I don't check my email.
But the other thing you should keep in mind is that your project can be manifested in many different forms. You know, that it can be a book, it can be an exhibition, but also think about things like, you know, talks like this, or live performances like Pop-Up Magazine or a TEDx talk or something. I mean, there's just, you know, it could be a billboard or wheat pasting or zines that you hand out. I mean, there's just so many different, you know, formats now through which you can reach people directly, and you don't have to wait for some gatekeeper, you know, like an editor somewhere to pick up on that either.
It's funny you mentioned wheat pasting. When I was at SVA, you probably don't even remember, but I used to take these early pictures and wheat paste them around Chinatown.
Oh, really? Wow,
Yeah.
you were ahead of your time. That's amazing.
Well, no, I mean, you saw people do all, like Keith
Yeah.
Haring did stuff,
But
right?
like,
So, I was
you
like,
know.
okay, let me just put it out. And nothing ever happened. But I was
Yeah.
like, let me put them around town, and maybe somebody would be like, hey, who's this family on all over
Did you have
Chinatown?
a way for people to contact you when you did?
No.
Oh, well.
Probably should have.
So, I
But,
mean, think about,
maybe I was
JR.
trying to listen. I don't
Just-
have social media now, I do, but.
Yeah, but Disturb, JR, it's a big
Yeah.
thing,
I took
so.
Polaroids of people looking at them. And then I brought them into school and be like, maybe something is here, like JR did stuff like that, and I don't know. But I was like, you throw spaghetti against the wall and see what happens. But I was wheat pasting stuff, and I just took pictures of people looking at it, and I don't know, maybe
It's
hang
just
around.
that, the most important thing is that you're making the work, because then you have something, whether it's now or in 20 years, the accumulation that you can share in so many different ways. And who knows, in another 20 years, how many different ways you're going to be able to distribute the work. There'll be some mind meld thing that you can send out into the ether. I mean, you just have no idea. But the most important thing is to actually make sure the work exists, and that way you have something you can do with it.
Yeah, I don't know how much longer we got, but I'd always just say make work. That's all I can say. Make work, and you're gonna make a lot of bad work. You're gonna make decent work, but just stick with it. Again, if you find something that you love or you're really curious about, just make pictures. Probably find a day job, which is fine, right? Because make work when you can, right? If you're a waitress, you make photographs, and that's your job. If you're, go become a teacher, you make photographs, and that's, you have some way of supporting yourself to make work. And who cares what you're doing to do that, right? If the goal is to have projects or have projects completed, you just have to make the photographs. It's really, really, really easy to sit on a couch and watch Netflix. Done it, right? So just have to make work, okay?
But I also love the idea, that if you're a creator, that you have some area of expertise, whether, you're a nurse or whether you just love sports or cooking, but some kind of underpinnings so that editors really trust you, so that they understand that you know the terrain when you're going into that territory, and that you're not going to make some, silly mistake, or that you know who all the experts are and you can contact them. I think that's really helpful too, when you're trying to look for work on a steady basis.
Yeah, I had a quick question. I would love maybe moving away from this project. I know you're working a lot with your father's archive and going through that. And I know you were working on, I don't know if you still are, but a long-term project photographing on trains in Varanasi, in the train station. So I'd love
harder to do.
Yeah, a little bit of travel to get there. But I would love to hear you talk about maybe that project, if that's still ongoing, what you've been learning going through your father's, very large archive he was a professional photographer and traveled around the world. And maybe what insights that's giving to you, to your own work.
Okay, so for, this is what I'm mostly known for. I've done other things. I always go back to this because that is something I do. All right. I did a project where I photographed in the Varanasi, India train station for weeks on end, but I felt that I've been to India 6 times, so I wanted to stick in one place and see all the things that happen in a day at this one place, which came from here, which came from this project. So the India train station in Varanasi had a big impact on me when I was a young man, and so I did that. That's not as easy to do anymore. But my father was a professional photographer, right? I failed to mention. Oh yeah, I did mention it. He met her over there. He died a long time ago.
His name was George Holton.
George Holton. He was a photo travel photographer. He went to 125 countries before he died. I go through his archive, which is literally like a closet in my apartment. I post my father's work on Instagram in the hope that that's like the spaghetti on the wall. Someone's going to see it. Shameless plug. All right, you could do Thomas_Holton_photography at Instagram. All right, I do outtakes from the Lams, old stuff. I found Polaroids that the kids took of me, which I've been posting on Instagram, and I post my dad's work. So that's a shameless plug to go see stuff. But I finally been scanning the work, going through my dad's work. Again, 150 countries, 120 countries before he died early. It's an incredible archive of a time that this literally doesn't exist anymore. These places don't look like this anymore. What I've learned from that is more personal in the way that I remember my father. He died when I was 10, but I just think about the things that man saw, like going to all these countries in 1950, going to China in 1950, going to Russia in 1950, Mongolia, all these places, things that he saw and the people he met, and all the photographs that I've been posting. A lot of them are portraits, and I love the fact that everyone's dead now, right? But I love the fact that that woman in Nepal or that monk in Nepal met my father. I think that's very cool, for me as his child. So that's been a joy to go through, but it's just so much to go through. I'm trying to find a home for it. I'll pick Charlie's brain sooner or later, where we can find a home for it. But just going through it and just, seeing the things he saw is just incredible, and from all over the world. And I love the fact that I think about like that old man in that photograph in India met my dad. That's pretty cool. So that's really more meaningful for me as his son.
So when you're scanning all of those pictures, are you putting them into hard drives like Horcruxes?
Those go into the cloud, and then you just hope Google doesn't go out of business anytime soon, right? So, or they give you a warning, like, take your stuff off the cloud quick, we're going out of business. My job gives me, like Google Drive gives you like 5 gigs, which is like 100 photographs on a digital camera. Through my work, it's unlimited, so I have to keep working. So I get unlimited Google Drive through my work, which is amazing, because usually, like I said, they give you 1 gig or 5 gigs, which if you guys filled up a memory card, quickly that disappears, right? So.
And what about Adam's question about, how going through his work is influencing your work? I mean, do you see any sort of visual or stylistic kind of influences? I bring my way of seeing things to the editing process, right? So there might be pictures that he might have chose, but I'm choosing the ones that are a little calmer. And again, you could see it. I've been posting a lot on Instagram. That tend to be like these quieter moments of him and a person. He did a lot of stuff for animal magazines, so like I have to just kind of go through like pictures, thousands of pictures of birds and fish and cheetah, which I'm just like not as interested in. But I try to find the portraits, right? The one-on-ones, something that's really meaningful to me as a photographer. I consider myself a portrait photographer, right? I consider myself a portrait photographer. And also for me, and this comes through and probably in this whole conversation, photography for me, I consider it an emotional act. Hopefully you want to consider making images an emotional act, right? Because what you're doing is you are having an emotional reaction to sight. You see something happening in front of you and you go, oh crap, I gotta hit that picture. And that little aha moment is where it's all at, right? So for me, photography, I try to make it as emotional as possible, because then you care about what you're photographing, right? It is an emotional reaction to sight. You see something happening, there's a light at a certain time of day, a dancer's jumping in the sky, beautiful light, you go, oh, aha, I gotta make that work. And if you can kind of do that as much as you can, you'll feel fulfilled. So it's coming up on 8 o'clock. Does anybody else have any questions before we close out? Oh.
Thank you for sharing this wonderful project. Quick question. How did you get on the radar at the Smithsonian?
Funny story. I did not reach out to them. This is literally how funny life works, okay? I gave a presentation of this Chinatown work to my school. I had a show at the Museum of the City of New York in 2018 or 19, and so my school was like, hey, would you like to come up and do, an assembly for high school kids? I was like, hey, my career is taking off here, so we're, oh, great. So I did a presentation of this very work to a high school auditorium of 400 kids at 8:15 in the morning where they're all asleep. But one of the teachers is best friends with the curator.
That's amazing.
That's you just, all the emails I've sent, all the emails we've all sent to publishers and galleries that just like go into a void of a black hole, right? Because that's what it is, right? This is a black hole, right? Like, oh, I reached out to 20 people about a show. And you go, nothing, right? And this was like a teacher who was my colleague's best friends with the curator of Smithsonian, and was like, you guys see this kid's work. And she looked it up, was like, oh, I'm putting a show together. The show is called Kinship in the Smithsonian, and it's about how 8 artists approach this idea of kinship. It could be family, community, belonging, togetherness. It's a very broad definition, but I'm one of the 8.
And also includes Jess T. Dugan, who is wonderful, and Jessica Todd Harp. So,
There's 8 artists, 4 painters, and 4 photographers. And the photographers are me, Jessica Todd Harper, who's photographing her. She has 4 children.
That's beautiful work, too.
Jess Dugan, who's doing a lot of work in the LGBTQ
Who's the
community.
fourth
Latoya Ruby Frazier, who's a big
right,
deal
of
at this
course,
point.
who
And
is
so
amazing,
she's a
yeah.
big social
The Braddock,
activist, image maker,
work.
and many of you might know her work.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And so we're the photographers.
It's a great show, really great.
The rest of us painters.
I know
I'm
what
sorry. There might be painters here.
Sorry.
I always joke. I
So, yeah.
painted my bathroom. How hard? My best friend at work is a painter, and we just give crap to each other all the time. He's like, oh, photography, click. How hard is that? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I painted my bathroom this weekend. How hard is that? So.
There was another question?
Hi, yeah, my name is Anastasia. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time here and for visiting and showing your work. I was just curious how you started out in black and white and how you've made this decision to then go into color, how that affected the narrative, how that affected your own workflow, and if you had any trepidations at that time kind of making a switch or a handoff.
I think I came into it thinking like, as an older gentleman, like, classic photography is black and white documentary, right? The stuff that you end up learning as a college kid. And so I shot black and white because I thought that was what serious photographers did, right? And so then a year into shooting them here at SVA, I think it was Mitch Epstein. I don't know if he still works here anymore, but Mitch was like, try color. And he's a very well-known color photographer. And I was like, what? And he's like, I'll just try it. So guess what? You just go buy color film, and I just was blown away by seeing like the coats, right, and the soap, and the feather duster thing. You know what I mean? So I didn't go back after that. So I stayed with color because color is information, color is tone, color is emotion. And I didn't talk about this picture. I guess we skipped through it a little bit. This is, it was here in this building where someone's like, how many people in the family? And I said, 5. And they're like, there's 6 table settings. And that was in crit class. Hey, look at those crit classes. They drive you crazy. But they were just like, I was like, oh yeah, what about it? And they're like, duh, you're the 6. And I was like, let me write that down. So you having this community here is incredibly, a gift. And I don't want to sound like maudlin or anything, but I have 3 of my classmates here. I miss this the most, sharing work with people, getting feedback from people. You got Adam Adam and Randy were there when I was here, like people giving you ideas, bouncing ideas off of you, telling to look at this book, look up this photographer. I kind of operate a little bit in a bubble now, which I'm still up to date with. I try to, go to shows as much as I can and know what's happening, but that sense of community is something that is a really special gift that you have for 2-3 really quick years, and it's what I miss the most. But then switching color was literally a teacher telling me to do that, and then I was shooting color 35, all right, and I was shooting way too quickly. I was shooting with a flash at the time, so you could just kind of bang things out, and I think it was either Mitch or Andrew Moore who was like, do you have access to, stop using the flash, you're shooting too quickly. And I was like, well, I have a medium format film camera at the time. So this is actually Mamiya 645, if that means anything to anybody. So that slowed me down because that camera is just a clunky pig, right? So that just slowed me down because I couldn't shoot with a flash. I couldn't shoot just firing things off because I knew the flash was going to catch it. This made me slow down. So the father with the hand like this looking at me, the woman tenderizing pork was all Mamiya 645 because you had to really be slow, and things like you have to change the film backs and all that kind of stuff. So, and now I'm shooting digital, which was my Mamiya died. and it was going to be $1,500 to repair the Mamiya. I said, what, $1,500? So you check eBay, and a Mamiya in good condition was going for $400. So I was like, nope. So I got a digital camera. But digital's pretty remarkable. But you bring the same approach, right? Slow, methodical, paying attention. You could buy that $50,000 Hasselblad camera, correct? And you could take really, really bad pictures with it.
But another important thing that Tom just said, try to keep in mind, try to take your community with you when you leave. Try to create that in some form, with fellow photographers or with, people from school or other photographers you meet through whatever, workshops or Eddie Adams or whatever, because it's really important to have some kind of a peer group or a cohort that you can trust, to show your work and get feedback and to creatively sort of have those exchanges.
And there will be, I guess we're almost done, but there's opportunities after school. We used to try to keep it up, right? We used to go to Shuli's house and have some beer and show some pictures, and we did that for several years, I think. We just, showed new work, and then that kind of petered out. But there's also, obviously, Adam and Randy and Charlie know about the portfolio reviews everywhere, and that's, your goal is to get your work in front of as many eyeballs as possible, right? Because there is a black hole out there, but you never know whose eyeballs will see it. So you make the work, try to get it out into as many eyeballs as possible. There's portfolio reviews. Some of them are money grabs, but there is some legitimate portfolio reviews.
There's a really great one, actually, that's open right now. I forget when the deadline is. I think it might be in March. But the New York Times and Photoville and CUNY do one every year. It's been Zoom for the last 2 years, and it's going to be Zoom again this year. But definitely, if you're interested, you should look and apply because it's free.
The New York Times portfolio review is free.
And it's incredibly competitive.
It closed already? All right.
Oh,
I've been rejected
okay,
that from 3 times. So go figure. I'm not famous. It's just, they maybe think like, you've had shows, you don't need a portfolio review. But I always take a crit.
But it's also something to keep in mind for next year or the year after, because a lot of times also you're not ready to do it when you're in school, but because it's open to everybody, anybody can apply. And so it's incredibly competitive because it's free, and also especially this year because it's Zoom, a lot of people will apply internationally. But next year I hope they'll go back to being in person, and so it might be a little more manageable for those
Photoville is in Brooklyn. I've done Photoville. I got into Photoville once.
Photoville
Papo's
is
got into
fantastic.
Photoville. You got into Photoville? Never mind. I lied. I got in Photoville, and it's up on the walls in Brooklyn Bridge Park for a couple months. Oh, the fence. Isn't that the Photoville?
Yes, it's run by Photoville.
Oh, it's same but different, right? Same
Yeah,
thing.
anyway.
But
Did we
anyway,
have
there's
any other-
opportunities.
Any other questions? Sorry, was there one other person who had their hand up?
Have you ever been received the feedback as you're gazing at your life, at Lam life, and what is your feedback to the gaze opinion, and what is your perspective about gaze in today's photography world?
Gaze?
Yeah.
Are we back in theory class, Adam? Is that really? I tried it. You're triggering me, man. The theory class. I can't. I have a hard time answering stuff like that. I get feedback from my colleagues, right? I think that's important. If we're really talking about the gaze, I find it as this is a particular photography is a collaborative act for most part. If you're a portrait photographer, it's a collaborative act. If you're a landscape photographer, you're collaborating with the planet to provide you with something interesting to photograph. But I can't even. I don't even know how to. I'm maybe people in the thick of it can answer that. I know what you mean by the gaze. Yeah, I can't.
I think in this case it's largely a moot point, because of your engagement and relationship with the subject. Like, that's what makes it irrelevant, because you're so intimately bound up in their lives, and the work is a kind of collaborative project. So
There was,
it's-
I would say,
would
like,
agree. I would agree.
I would say in the beginning, it was a little more challenging when I met like the 10 different families, And I kind of felt like an interloper, perhaps, right? Because Rosie introduced me to these people, and you would just sit there like this on your couch, wait for me to leave. So yes, I got the pictures, but what Adam, I think, is what Adam is saying is once I got very close to the Lams, that this became less of an issue because I was just part of their family. I went to Hong Kong with them. I didn't even mention that, right? So like that was during grad school. They went to Hong Kong to visit their family, and they said, "You want to come?" And I was like, "Okay." And it was comical for them to explain to all their relatives in Hong Kong, like, who is this kid taking a million pictures?
So, yeah.
You didn't say you were going to bring a friend.
Right.
And, but yeah, so maybe it is a little tougher to answer that right now because we're like family, so perhaps there's not that play. But at first it was tough. At first it was tough.
I don't know if this is what you are trying to get at, but I'll just say, coming from National Geographic, they're kind of the poster child for dropping in this old white guy into a completely unknown, culture and bringing back images that might not really resonate with community. And I think there's been a real effort to change that. And I think that, there's definitely that desire to try to go within a community first, to have people from the community tell their own story. But I also have to say that I would hate to think that it's limited to only someone within a particular subgroup, who can tell the story of that community. I think that ideally that would be a wonderful way to have stories get out into the world. And I think that also a lot of that process was accelerated by COVID because a lot of editorial and corporate different entities were forced into having to use people who were local because travel was so limited because of COVID. But on the other hand, I would love to think, that anyone could become really educated about a community and spend a lot of time within a community and be able to collaborate with the community to tell that story.
That's nice. I'll quickly just jump real quick in there. I never wanted to be someone that just took one picture and left, right? I didn't want it to be like a zoo visit, right? So, yes, I met 10 families, but I went back to all 10 families the next week or the next 2 weeks with prints that we made here to try to show them, obviously, hopefully let me in again, but also show them I'm not like out, right? So yes, in the beginning, perhaps you're a little wary of coming across as visiting a zoo, which you never want to have that feeling. But what Elizabeth is saying is I urge you, I suppose, to know the subjects you want to photograph more and get to know them. I mean, I still don't speak Chinese. I know a little bit, but over time, that issue is obviously gone. But I was definitely thought about that as we started doing it, because you kind of felt like you don't want to be like felt like an invader, right? So
you don't want to have that model of parachuting in and taking something from people, and then never staying in touch or giving anything back.
Photography is a little bit of an aggressive act in the way that you go out there, you take photographs, and you go back and you show them with your name on it, and there's someone in the photograph you might never see again. I didn't want that, but that might answer your question a little bit.
Yeah, and there are photographers who have creative models, people like Stephen Ferry, who go into communities and basically share their photography and basically give the photography to the community so the community can do whatever they want with it. And, people have shared profits from, whatever they've done with their work. So I think there are a lot of precedents for, how you can be very compassionate about dealing with people that
I give half the money to any book I sell. I give half the money.
Well, I think that's a good point to stop, and I want to just thank Elizabeth and Tom for their generosity and their wisdom, and for sharing this wonderful project. Thank you. And before everyone takes off tonight, I just wanted to give a heads up for those of you who are not a member of our immediate community of students. We have two really exciting events coming up in March. On the 18th, which is a Saturday, we're hosting a very large full-day symposium on AI in the lens-based arts, which is really exciting. Stay tuned. If you found out about this event, no doubt you're following us on social media. We will be posting information about that soon. I'm very excited that Hito Styrol is giving the keynote address. We're having Mutale Nkande, Fred Richin, Stephanie Dinkins, Carla Ganis are all participating in this. It's going to be really wonderful and engaging. And then a couple of days after that, on the 21st, Isaac Diggs and Edward Hillel are going to be here talking about their collaborative photographic project, which has involved photographing in Harlem and Detroit. Really wonderful work. So stay tuned for that. And thank you again for all coming out to join us this evening.
Thank you.